I'm now for James Creedon and Media Watch. James, where are you starting?
Evening, Mark. Well, we'll have a look. Basically, first of all, it's A-level results day in the UK.
Don't I know it?
Well, if you're British, you can't avoid it, I guess. And even if you're living in France, you can't seem to avoid it.
My oldest boy got his results today. He did very well.
Good for him.
Well done, son.
He's one of these people here, basically smiling. You've got in the Daily Mail all of these photos. You see them every year, smiling young people who've done well in their A-levels, and they're pointing out the contrast, really, I suppose, between the people who've done well, those who are left behind. And there's a very interesting article in The Guardian today. Young people have no right to riot, but they have a right to be angry. Now, this was written by a teacher by the name of Sassy Lloyd, who teaches in one of the poorest boroughs in London, in the East End of London, and basically he says the press drools over these kind of photogenic photos every year of people in their A-levels, but really one of my brightest students, he says, wasn't even able to sit her exams because she's awaiting trial, and she's one of the many victims of, I suppose, society really in the East End of London and elsewhere. Basically, she was keeping a sawn-off shotgun for her boyfriend, who asked her to hold on to it. Then there was a raid on her house, and now she's in all sorts of trouble, even though she should have had a promising future because she was a bright young girl. So he says, really, she grew up just 2 miles away from the penthouse apartments in Canary Wharf, and as far away from the lives of the A-level girls as it's possible to imagine.
It's a very fine dividing line between having and not having, a very sharp fall too,
right.
and often you only have to go sort of slightly over the edge into criminality, and away you go, and your reputation's lost.
That's it. And he's very critical of the school system for not keeping people on board for longer. He says that basically the problem is the system increasingly offers students nothing. He says that for the past year he watched in horror as a lot of the programs at youth centres were taken away.
Educational maintenance allowance, because this was something that was given to
EMC,
kids
he does.
above the age of 16 to enable them to stay at school, and obviously an extra payment to keep them there. This has been scrubbed completely. My oldest boy got it.
Right.
My next kids won't get it at all.
So that went. Youth centres were done away with. Tuition fees were trebled. So he said, and there are fewer and fewer university places for young people, especially from, I suppose, deprived backgrounds. So he says it's a very bleak outlook, and a lot of the time the education system doesn't give much hope, and you have kids just bumping along at the bottom of the class for years. They mightn't be academic, yet the school system offers them nothing. So he says, really, austerity Britain needs to give young people purpose, hope, and a stake in society if we want them to take part in it. So he understands their anger.
What we're seeing here, though, I mean, the pictures of things like boxing clubs and things like that. I think sport, you've got to really think that sport can play a big role in keeping kids on side and making kids do things. Certainly where I came from, you know, if you played football, if you took part at the boxing club, as I used to, it really gave people a target and something
focus.
To go for, and a focus to keep them out of trouble. That was one of the things.
Now, what's interesting,
it's old fashioned, but it was true.
Absolutely. Now, what's interesting about that's a teacher in the East End of London. You've also got the New York Times editorial basically saying exactly the same thing. Britain's urban wasteland needs constructive attention from the Cameron government, not just punishment. And basically they're saying wrong answers in Britain, the wrong answers.
James, we need to leave it there. James Creedon that with Media Watch. Stay with us. More news to come.